and welcome to the X22 Report. My name is Dave, and this is episode 393, and today's date is June 17th, 2014, and the title of this episode is The Iraqi Conflict is the Path to War with Syria and the Collapse of the Dollar. Now, we all understand what is going on in Iraq. Everything is falling apart there. The United States government has ships positioned in the Persian Gulf ready to strike at any minute to stop those terrorists. We have the Iraqi government trying to battle against these people who are rising up. Of course, they're calling them the insurgent, militants, terrorists, any other name they can put on it to make them seem very, very evil. And we have to understand what is really taking place in Iraq, because what we see is we have many different sides and many different religious groups inside each one of these Middle East countries. In Iraq, there's about 37% which is made up of Sunnis and about 65% which is made up of Shia. And in Syria, we have about 74% made up of Sunnis, and then we have the rest as non-Sunnis, and that's about 16%. And Iran, we have to understand, is also 10% Sunnis and 89% Shiites. So if we look at this picture here, we can see what's going on. Now, when Saddam Hussein was in power, he was a Sunni. He also made the country secular, where each individual religion and group can practice on their own and no one would disturb them. They were all equal. Now we have Maliki in power, and he is trying to set up a sectarian type of state where he really does not like the Sunnis, and he comes down hard on them. And now we see ISIL or ISIS or the Sunni people saying, you know what, enough's enough, and we're taking control of the situation. And a lot of these men in the Sunni group who are taking back the country are part of Saddam Hussein's group, and they are moving through the country. And a lot of the Iraqi army that are in these towns like Mosul and many of the other towns, they look at the situation and they say, you know what, this is really not my city or town. It's made up of mostly Sunnis. I'm not really getting involved, so I'm stepping out at this time. And this is what happened within the cities that were taken over very, very fast. And that's why these people inside these cities who are mostly Sunnis are saying, yes, life is better, because Maliki was a dictator. He was pushing his agenda by trying to wipe out the Sunnis in the country because he's Shiite, and we can see this is completely happening right now in Iraq. Now, we understand the United States government, okay, the central bankers are sitting there saying, what's going on here? They don't realize that people will always have a choice, and people will do things they do not expect. But don't worry, they're going to use this to spin their own agenda. And what is their own agenda? Well, we know exactly what that is. We know the agenda is to get into Syria. Now, the question is, how are they going to use this to get into Syria and really kick off World War III before the dollar completely collapses? Because what we're seeing right now in Iraq, we see that the Sunni group has already raided the central banks. We see they've taken control of one of the refineries and kind of shut it down at this time. And we can see right now that the corporate media is continually building up the terrorist propaganda. They're also bringing in information about Syria, about the chlorine attacks. They're also bringing information about how these ISIS and ISIL groups are moving weapons they've confiscated into Syria. So we can see they're building up this agenda. And we have to remember, inside Syria, they have kept 7 to 8% of the chemical weapons inside Syria. This was done on purpose because the treaty is still live and ongoing between Russia, United States, and Syria. Now, if they can prove, which they're having a very difficult time doing, that Assad used chemical weapons like chlorine, they can say, all right, the treaty is null and void, and we can go into Syria. Now, we have to remember, the United States central bankers, they're very, very nervous about this situation. And of course, President Obama says there's no boots on the ground, and we come to learn that, yes, he's sending in around 275 military men into the area. They are combat ready and ready to go. And we can see they're going to be protecting the embassy. The embassy is pretty much being evacuated. I know the government official, Psaki, was out there saying that, oh no, we're just moving them to different locations. That's called an evacuation. And we can see this whole situation is going to really ramp up. Right now, Iran is still saying, yes, we will work with the United States, but we are completely saying that we need to keep foreign interests out of the country. Now, you have to remember, Iran is mostly made up of Shiites. So is the newly formed puppet regime in Iraq. They are mostly Shiites right now. They do not want the Sunnis to take control of the country, and this is one of the reasons why I think Iran has come in and said, you know, we will help out in this situation. And all of a sudden, a lot of the government officials in the United States and in England are also now going to Iran and saying, yes, we will work with you. Please help us out in this situation. And just a month ago, weren't they the evil enemy of creating nuclear weapons, and they're the ones who are promoting terrorism all over the world? And now the United States and England, they are working with Iran. Even Britain now, they even said they could open up their embassy inside Iran at this time. Now, we see all this happening. What effect does this have on the dollar? Now, of course, the corporate media, the governments out there, they're pushing this ridiculous agenda that, oh, gas prices are going to be going up because of this conflict. This reminds me of 1970, 1971, 72. I don't know if most of you can remember back then when they had the red flags, the green flags, and they also did the odd, even days for filling up your car. And I remember going to the gas station with my parents at that time because they told us during this period of time in the 70s that gas was running out and there were shortages all over the place. Of course, back then, and still today, they don't tell you the truth. That had nothing to do with it. We were coming off the gold standard, and they were trying to put us on the petrodollar system at the time, and this is why all that happened. The same thing's happening right now. It isn't the problem with the oil from Iraq. It is the dollar collapsing. When they say prices of oil are going to go up, it means the dollar is collapsing. It takes more dollars to pay for that same oil. Now, if these people in Iraq do take over the country and they kick the puppet regime out and the United States has nothing to do with it anymore, and they start selling the oil not using the dollar, you're going to see a rapid decrease in the value of the dollar, and of course this is going to spread all across the Middle East, and this is their biggest fear right now. Now, they want to start this war off before this happens. They need some type of an event, and this is why the government officials out there are yelling and screaming about another 9/11, about if we can't contain this, we are going to see terrorism here in the United States. We don't know where, but it will happen. It might even be worse than 9/11, and they're continually pushing this agenda. They are prepping us for what is coming if they cannot take control of the situation in Iraq. Let's get into the economic collapse news. Now, we can see out in Greece, they are having a very rough time out there. Unemployment is skyrocketing. The debt cannot be sustained. And of course, we're seeing this all throughout Europe. This is not the only place this is happening. But right now, the Greek state and insurance funds have the right to seize bank account deposits for debt owed without informing the account holder. Now, they just passed this on Monday, and this is unbelievable. So they don't have to prove anything. If you owe money, they can go right into your account in Greece and just take it. And what they're saying is that they don't want to notify the account holder because then they would have the opportunity of taking their money out. And of course, there is no proof. You're just going on the assumption that, yes, there is a debt. Yes, we're going to take your money without proving anything and just going right into the person's bank account, which is supposedly supposed to be private to you, and it is your money, and someone really needs to prove their case that they're taking it. But it looks like they ruled, the country Supreme Administrative Court ruled that, guess what? We can take it whatever we want. Now, it looks like here in the United States, all this talk about inflation, there's no inflation from the Fed, we got to get inflation up. Well, I'm seeing inflation all over the place. And one ways that manufacturers are combating this inflation is changing the size of products, substituting ingredients in food so the prices stay the same, but on other things like milk or meat or liquor and many other natural foods, we can see the prices are continually rising. They are not falling. Food index rose by 0.5% in May after increasing 0.4% in each of the 3 previous months, and the index for food at home increased by 0.7%. It is the largest increase since July 2011. So when they tell you, don't worry, we don't see any inflation, every time I go to the market, guess what? I see prices continually going up, especially on meat, beer, wine, fresh fruit. I'm seeing milk. I'm seeing it all go up. Now, at the same time this is happening, income, real average hourly earnings are declining. So we have deflationary causes on income, and we have inflationary causes on food and other products and fuel. So we can see this is not a good situation. When you see hourly wages dropping, we have a problem. We're seeing wages drop from $10.33 in February to $10.32 in March to $10.30 in April to $10.28 in May. This was the first year-over-year decline since October 2012. And I have people writing into the X22 report saying that, you know, they had a great job. They try to get the same job with the same amount of pay, and what they're finding is they want to pay them less for doing the same job, and it's very difficult to find the same wage that these people were at when they were looking for jobs. And I have to say, from the people that I know, they are having the same tough time finding this. They cannot, and it's very, very difficult, because then you have to rework your resume, you have to take a lower paying job. Of course, your house, your car, your way of living was based on that higher income, and this is when problems really start to fall apart. And this is where their lives start to really fall apart. And really, we can see that this economy is completely falling apart in front of our eyes. I know they're out there saying manufacturing's up and everything's getting better. These are little hiccups. They're going to completely collapse. Just like the real estate market, we see this collapsing right in front of our eyes. It is really not getting better. It is getting worse. And right now, the Commerce Department says builders started work at a seasonally adjusted annual rate of 1.01 million homes. This was down 6.5% from 1.07 million in April. Construction firms began to work on fewer single-family houses, condominiums, and apartments last month. And right now, we see it is completely falling apart. We had our little, I don't even want to know if you can call it a bump. There was no bump. This is the hot season for real estate. More mortgage companies are laying off people. Real estate's going to really take a dive at this time. It will not, it cannot recover at all. It is going to completely slide. The economy is going to completely slide, and everyone's going to be looking around going, what just happened? All those flippers, speculators who are holding on to the homes thinking that the housing market's going to increase as time goes on because the corporate media is telling us this. And of course the government officials, the Fed, they were all telling us that housing is rebounding, recovering. These people are going to be stuck with these homes just like in 2008, and all these people who went out to buy these homes with 0% down, 5% down, with adjustable rate mortgages, it's all going to start to fall apart as we head into the fall and into the winter of 2014. And forget about 2015. It's going to be a complete disaster. Now, the U.S. government and the Fed, they realize this economy is completely falling apart. They know it. They realize it's happening, and this is why they're creating all these new tax laws trying to bring in revenue. Well, right now, this is coming out of the Financial Times. The Federal Reserve officials had discussed whether regulators should impose an exit fee on bond funds to avert a potential run by investors. I wonder why they are thinking about this. Why would you ever think that you would need an exit fee to stop people dumping the bonds? That's very interesting. Officials are concerned that bond funds are becoming shadow banks because investors can withdraw their money on demand even though the assets held by the funds can be hard to sell in a crisis. Exit fees would seek to discourage retail investors from withdrawing funds, thereby making their claims less liquid and making a fire sale of the assets more unlikely. Now, why in the world would they be thinking of this right now? I'm going to tell you why. Because when the whole economy starts collapsing, what are people going to be doing? They're going to dump their bonds. They're going to be like, I'm out. They're going to dump their stocks. I'm out. They're going to get out of this as fast as they possibly can. And they're trying to make it so people don't get out. And this is what they're doing right now. I mean, it's going to be horrific when this starts to fall apart, because most of the people who are not awake, who think the economy and the stock market is all increasing, they think everything is fine, it's going to be a shocker to them. And this is when we get into trouble. And this is why the Department of Justice, United States government created DHS. Department of Justice right now has an anti-domestic terrorism force to go after those homegrown extremists. They are doing this at this point because they realize when this economy falls apart, it is going to be a mess. And of course, this Nevada shooting is helping them promote this, and this is what they're using. The Southern Poverty Law Center estimates there are about 300,000 so-called sovereign citizens in the U.S., and that number may be growing in Nevada. The FBI says sovereign citizen extremists are part of a domestic terrorist movement. The SPLC says the sovereign citizen movement has been growing for 6 years, and because of the Bundy Ranch protests in April, Nevada has attracted a large number of anti-government extremists. What do you think they're doing right now? They're building up the propaganda so people will look at this and say, oh, look, anti-government, arrest them. This is what they are doing right now. They are pushing this forward. They realize what's coming. And that's why this whole entire time with the NSA, the Fusion Center, this is why they've been creating all these lists, because they need to know who these people are, and these people are a threat to their authority, and they are really ramping this up. Now, out in Ukraine, we realize the situation out there is getting worse by the moment. It is not getting better. It's falling apart. And what we're seeing right now is the U.S. administration intends to make a decision within 2 to 4 weeks about toughening the sanctions against Russia because of all the problems they've been creating out in Ukraine. And right now, they're out there, they're discussing it, they're not going to wait for months, they're going to do it very, very quickly. Now, we'll have to see what type of sanctions they actually place on Russia. I can't believe they're going to put it on sectors of Russia, because that would have a horrific effect on the EU, the European nations, and the United States. So we'll have to actually see what they do. A lot of this is lip service. Now, Kiev, as we understand, the puppet regime has received billions of dollars from the IMF, from the United States, from the EU, and guess where they're spending it? No, not on the people, not to help them out. They are spending it on the military. The Ukrainian authorities have unofficially spent tens of millions of euros allocated earlier by the European Union for bolstering the country's border security against Russia. This money is going nowhere near the people. The people are suffering. Energy costs are going up. Russia has stopped the gas, and the situation there is getting worse. Now, every time the United States government central bankers take over a country and they put this puppet regime in place, the people actually suffer. And just the other day, yesterday I should say, Yatsenyuk was out there saying that he wants to wipe the evil out of the southeastern section. He also called them subhuman. So we can see how these people actually think of these people who don't go along with them. Now think about that here in the U.S. because he's taking his instructions from the United States government central bankers, you know, the elite, the globalists, the people on top. How do they really think of you? They tell you you don't have the right to own arms. You do not have the right to speak freely wherever you want. We'll set up little cages for you so you can speak over there. They're telling you we can come into your house whenever we want. You don't have the right to refuse a search. How do they really think of you? Are they really backing up the people of the U.S. and the rights of the people? No. They're spying on you. They're putting you into little caged-in areas so you can talk freely away from the situation. They're telling you you can't be within like 200 feet of a U.S. official because they're afraid of terrorism or something happening. They're also telling you you can't protest outside the White House. You have to be a certain number of feet back. This is how they think of you. They think of you low, serfs, people that just work for us. And when I say us, it's the central bankers, U.S. government, the globalists, the elite. Now, also in Ukraine, what's happening there is it looks like because of military action, a lot of the pumps and the electricity are not getting to the water pumps in the southeastern region, and it looks like the water supply has been cut off in 4 towns in the Donetsk region. And this is going to be difficult on the people in that area. We also had a gas pipeline blast in Ukraine. It was on the west side of Ukraine. And right now Russia is out there. Gazprom is saying that because of the reduction in pressure, this caused an explosion. They're also looking in to see if this is some type of terrorist act. They're really not sure, but they're leaning toward the lowering of the pressure really caused this to burst. And this is what they're going with right now. Now, the United States, as we know, is sending over more and more ships over to Europe. And what we're seeing right now, and I mentioned this once before, but it actually has arrived. The U.S. guided missile destroyer arrived on Monday at the Spanish naval port at Rota amid escalating tensions with Russia and now Iraq. Joining the USS Donald Cook, which has been at the naval station in Rota in Spain since February, the guided missile destroyer USS Ross is the second of 4 Arleigh Burke-class destroyers to be deployed to the station. The 4 U.S. Navy destroyers are considered to be the cornerstone of NATO's European missile system. Moscow has said that it considers the system to be a direct threat to its security. And of course it is. That's why they set it up, that's why it's there, and that's why they have it, because they realize once this event occurs, then they get this war started. They're going to need these systems to, shoot down those ballistic missiles. And of course, as we're starting to learn, a lot of these systems don't even work. So this is a huge, huge problem. Now, moving on to the Iraqi crisis. What we're seeing there is there have been polls out there, and one of the latest polls, a survey conducted by the Public Policy Polling, found that 74% of the public is opposed to deploying combat troops back in Iraq. Well, of course they are, because we were lied to once before. They told us there were weapons of mass destruction. We were going to go in there and free the people, and they're going to have democracy, freedoms. That's why we were going in there. And when we capture Iraq, all that oil is going to pay for the war, and none of it's true. Really, what happened was, let's see, Saddam Hussein was going to sell his oil not using the U.S. dollar. The central bankers didn't like that, so they went in, they invaded, they captured, they controlled the oil, they put the oil back on the U.S. dollar. That's pretty much what happened. And ever since, they needed to maintain control of the country, so they wiped out most of the Sunni rebellious people who were under Saddam Hussein. They replaced him with a leader who is Shiite, and now we have this leader who is not looking to have a secular country where each religion and the people have the freedom of just going about their own business. No one interferes with it. He's looking to have a sectarian type of country where he really doesn't like the Sunnis that much, and this is what we're seeing at this point. Now, in my other report, I went on to say that Iraq has shut down communication with Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. But they've gone further than that. And the question still is, why would they do this unless they're trying to hide something? Anytime a government shuts down the social or the internet, they're hiding something. And what the government, of course, the United States government will never admit to is any type of natural uprising from the people. Why wouldn't they want to, mention this? Because this whole entire war, people will look at this and go, wait a minute, we went in there to free them of Saddam Hussein, and now the same people who were under Saddam Hussein are having a popular uprising to remove the puppet regime the United States put into place. Well, that doesn't make sense. Why'd we go in there in the first place? And this is what they're trying to block. Iraq widened a clampdown on social media on Monday, blocking secure private communication channels to prevent Sunni militants from using it to communicate. This is the story they're going with. In addition to banning virtual private networks, it has also recently instructed mobile telephone operators to stop mobile data including instant messaging services. A mobile operator and an industry source said on Monday that they're blocking pretty much everything. That spurred many Iraqis to access these applications through VPNs, which are now blocked. VPNs allow the user to appear as if they're accessing the internet from elsewhere. Banning them may be ineffective because tech-savvy users can usually find alternative means, and they always do. There's always ways around using proxy servers to get back in because you can't. It's not coming from Iraq. It's coming from a different location. The government has instructed mobile operators to block mobile data. Iraq has yet to allow 3G services, and only basic websites and services are available over 2G. At this time. And why are they doing this? They don't want any information coming out of this country whatsoever about what's really going on. They don't want anyone inside the country knowing what's going on. They're trying to do a complete blackout of the situation. And people are trying to figure out, like, how did these people, these Sunni people, how did they go through these cities so quickly like this? Where was the army? What were they doing? Well, in about 3 days, the army had simply folded as the Sunni people rode into town. Its soldiers returned to their homes, and its weapons were carted away. The army's collapse signaled a sudden dramatic shift in the balance of power between Kurds, Sunnis, and Shiites. The reality that the Kurds had long ago lost faith in Prime Minister Maliki, ability to serve either their interests or those of Iraq. Maliki, a member of Iraq's Shiite majority, has been accused of repressing the Sunni Arab minority, including politicians and protesters. Shiite soldiers felt that they were too far away from home, had not been home for a while, and were dying on a daily basis for a city that they felt very little attachment to. In Sunni-dominated Mosul, those tensions meant some Shiite troops felt it was not worth trying to tackle the militants. It's not an environment in which soldiers were necessarily eager to fight there. The local community didn't welcome the army at all. So we can see that this uprising right now is on the Sunni side, pushing against the Shiite side. And this is why they were able to capture these areas so easily, because they're mostly made up of Sunnis. Now, of course, the Maliki got wind of what was going on, very upset that they didn't fight back, that they said, forget it, we're not even going to do it. And this is not really a good scenario for the army of Iraq, because if they're not fighting there, they're not going to really be fighting in many other places. They're getting tired of this. They really don't support Maliki at this time, and Maliki decided to dismiss several senior security force commanders on Tuesdays. Those dismissed included the top commander for the northern province, and he's just getting rid of those people who are not supporting him right now. And there's more and more articles coming out and analysis from people saying that the Shiite-led government of Maliki has now been challenged by a Sunni uprising. also involving militants from Islamic State of Iraq and the Levant, a jihadist group affiliated to Al-Qaeda. So it's really intermixed. A lot of them in there are from Saddam Hussein, who are leading the charge here, and mixed in there is ISIL in the groups who are part of the ISIL group, and this is why the United States government is sitting there and there's a total blackout at this time, because they don't want this information getting out there. They need to use this to their advantage to move into Syria and to really bomb and try to get rid of these people once and for all. And this is exactly what they're trying to do. I believe this is their whole intention right now, and they're bringing in the military assets. They're getting ready to do something, and we'll have to see as time goes on what does occur. Now, the Prime Minister, Maliki, he made a request to the United States, and he wanted permission to use and operate drones in Iraq, and right now the United States did not give him the ability to do it, and he is requesting that so he can fight off these people. Now again, Iran is out there. Now they're working with the United States, but they do not want any type of foreign intervention in Iraq. A senior Iranian lawmaker has reiterated the Islamic Republic opposition to foreign intervention in the internal affairs of Iraq. They do not want it in. Now, remember, Iran is mostly Shiite. The puppet regime in Iraq is Shiite. They want the Iraqi forces to take control of the area. They don't want to bring in other forces right now. They want to see if they can handle what is going on. Now, one of the biggest oil refineries have been shut down by the foreign staff, and they've been evacuated. There are military men, but the oil that is refined there is not moving into the country. It has been shut down, so they're not getting any type of oil out of this refinery right now. Now, John Kerry is out there, and he's saying that ISIS or the Sunni people don't have the ability to overrun Baghdad. He says, we are safe, there's no reason to panic, they're not going to be able to overrun this, and most of the people in Baghdad are Shiite, they're not Sunni, and we have to see, because every time John Kerry comes out there and tells you don't worry, they're never going to do it, it always seems to be the opposite, where yes, the Sunni people come in, they overrun Baghdad, they capture the other refineries, they capture the government, they close down the embassy, and now they have control of Iraq. And John Kerry is completely wrong. And this always seems to happen. Every time a government official tells you something, always think the opposite. The president said, no boots on the ground. All of a sudden, he's sending in 275. You're going to see a lot more go in there. They tell you, no, we're not going to do airstrikes. They're definitely going to do airstrikes. John Kerry's telling you that, no, Baghdad won't fall. You know Baghdad is going to fall. And right now, experts are out there, and they're saying they doubt that the Iraqi army can even retake major cities from the Sunni people. I'm not even going to call them ISIS or ISIL anymore, because that is something the U.S. government is pushing out there about terrorism. Let's just call them the Sunni people. Officials are trumpeting a counter-offensive, though success have been limited so far. The army was rapidly trained. Only some of them have been brought into combat, and there was a very erratic structure because when the U.S. left, it had planned to be there for another 2 years. There's also lots of corruption throughout the army, recruits buying jobs, paying for promotions to Maliki, and Maliki giving special favors to those who are loyal to him. So this whole thing is completely corrupt. There are a lot of payoffs going on. This is not a force that's going to really defend the country, because they're really not with the country. They're there for other reasons. They're there because they're making money, and you can see already in the towns and in the cities where these soldiers believed that, you know what, this is not my area, I'm not going to be here. They just dropped their weapons, they left. Actually, a lot of the soldiers who were Sunni based, they are joining up with the Sunni uprising, and they are moving towards Baghdad. Now, the former U.S. ambassador to Iraq is saying, well, if we're having this situation in Iraq, shouldn't John Kerry, the Secretary of State John Kerry, Be in Baghdad. Diplomacy is what is crucial right now, Crocker advised. We need to work with the Iraqis at the highest level. That would be Secretary Kerry backed by the president so they can demonstrate the national unity. Now, why isn't John Kerry in Baghdad? Think about this for a second. Remember the Ukraine situation where they controlled everything. They were in Ukraine, they controlled the opposition, they knew what was going to happen. They already had the cabinet there that was going to take the place of the government, Yatsenyuk and the others. They already knew. And guess who was there? We had senators visiting. We had the CIA in there. We had everyone visiting. John Kerry visited. Now here we are in Iraq. It's very different. The puppet regime's already there, but they're nervous. They don't want to go into Baghdad. Why? Because this is a true uprising, and they're not controlling this whatsoever, and something bad might happen there. And they are very, very nervous, and they're not stepping foot into the area. This is why the embassy has been evacuated. This is why they've been using the propaganda of terrorism, 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 because they need to get the people of the U.S., of Europe, to believe these terrorists are a threat to national security around the globe, and we need to go in there and get them. Now, the governor of the Central Bank of Iraq said, don't worry, they stole money from the central bank, but everything is secure now, and don't worry about it. Well, that's what they're worrying about. They're worrying about the central bank in Iraq, and he's telling everyone, don't worry, he has everything under control. So we can see where their minds are. It's not for the people. It's not for anything about the country. It's about oil, the U.S. dollar, and keeping that central bank alive. And right now, the Iraqi people are saying that Obama, he's concerned more about the oil inside the country than about the people. The U.S. government, the prime cause of these problems to begin with, prepares to intervene however it chooses. President Obama has so far expressed his concern over Iraqi oil twice when talking about recent events. He has not shown any regard or concern for the fate of 2 million people. We reject U.S. intervention and protest President Obama's inappropriate speech in which he expressed concern over oil and not over people. We also stand firmly against the brazen meddling of Iran. We reject Maliki sectarian and reactionary policies. We aim to stand with those who represent the interests of the people and to empower them in the face of this dangerous and reactionary attack. We call for a clear international position to curb the deteriorating situation as well as regional interference and to support the people of Iraq. These people are pissed. These people had it. They are done. Now, even the former Qatari ambassador to the United States offered up a warning to the Obama administration Monday that any military intervention on behalf of the government of Iraqi Prime Minister Maliki would be seen as an act of war on the entire community of Sunni Arabs. He also warned against the United States working with Iran to repulse the advance by the radical Sunni group, the Islamic State of Iraq and Syria, something the Secretary of State John Kerry said Monday the United States would be willing to consider. And we have to see what is going on here. The United States is completely losing control of the Middle East. They realize it. They're blacking out the situation, and all we get here in the United States is terrorism. That's pretty much it. And this goes on to say that Maliki's Shiite Muslim government has angered Sunnis across the Arab world for being close to Shiite-ruled Iran and for what Sunnis described as widespread mistreatment of their co-religiousness in Iraq. He added, we swiftly urge those concerned to pay attention to the demands of a large segment of the population who only seek equality and participation away from all forms of sectarian or discrimination against other religions in the country. Now, the White House is looking to shift some of the funds from Afghanistan down to Iraq to pay for what is going on there. And they realize it is getting out of hand. They've already brought in 275 troops to guard the embassy there in Baghdad. the president also said these 275 men are combat ready. And we also have many Marines off the coast of Iraq ready to be dropped in, and there are also a lot of other Marines around the borders ready to be pushed into the country when either Congress says yes, you can go in, and we voted on it, or they create a false flag event where they say the United States was attacked and now we need to go in and get these terrorists. Now, what's very interesting is Lindsey Graham, who's been out there saying that Iran is a threat, they're going to build nuclear weapons, oh my God, they're our enemy, enemy, enemy. He's been saying this for years. All of a sudden, on CBS's Face the Nation, Graham said he wanted the U.S. to work with Iran in order to help stabilize Iraq. So, can you really believe these government officials? They flip-flop like it's like no big deal. They really, one side, all these years he's saying they're a threat, they help with terrorism, and they're going to have a nuclear weapon and they're going to use it on the United States. The next breath, hey, I believe Iran should help the United States and we should work together. It's just completely unbelievable, because what's happening in Iraq is they are losing control of the situation. They don't know what to do. Now, of course, the corporate media is out there, and now they're playing up the path into Syria, because we understand this dollar is collapsing, and they realize what's happening. And if they let this happen without starting some type of war, it's all going to be blamed on the central bankers. And now they're not just going to go into Syria, because that would look a little ridiculous. They're going to need some type of an event, somehow, some way, to kick off this war, because it can't look like, oh, the United States just went in to fight terrorists and then they happen to go into Syria. They need something big to happen. So right now, what they're saying is that ISIL is now moving in more military equipment into Syria. They're taking it from Iraq and they're moving it into Syria. And they're also, I just saw on Reuters today that they had a story about the chlorine gas. Just so happens it just popped up right now. Chemical weapons inspectors have information suggesting that chlorine gas, like chemical weapons, have been used during the conflict in Syria. The information that was available to the fact-finding mission lends credence to the view that toxic chemicals, most likely chlorine gas, have been used in Syria. Now, if you notice, the whole entire report, the article that they were talking about in Reuters, they never said who used it. They just said it was used. Just like when the chemical weapons was used back in August of 2013, they said, yes, sarin gas was used, but they never said who actually used it. Of course, the United States says it was Assad. Then it came out that it was not Assad, it was the rebels. Here we are again. They're keeping the chemical weapons inside Syria. They're trying to avoid the treaty to get in there. But before they can do this, they're going to need some type of an event. I know I've been saying this for quite a while, but here we are. They are getting ready to do something. They're pushing this forward. They need to get into Syria. They need to take control of Iraq. They need to stop this before it spreads throughout the Middle East, because once this spreads and the other countries see that you can purchase the oil not using the dollar quickly collapses. We're seeing it right now, and it's going to get worse. If you haven't started preparing, I would start now. Get your food, get your water, get your supplies, get a weapon. If you have people who have diabetes or other type of sicknesses, get extra medicine so you can support them. Get toiletries. Get whatever you can. If you need to get gas and get gas tanks, get it now. Continually stock up. If you can at this time do gold and silver, do that. But I would get the other supplies first, because when inflation hits, then turns into hyperinflation, and things get really expensive because the dollar is collapsing, it's going to be a very difficult time going to the market and getting the food. And this is where the riots are going to happen. This is where people are going to go, whoa, wait a minute. Prices are going up every day. I can't afford this. And you're going to see people get very, very desperate. People are going to be losing their jobs. The housing market's going to be collapsing. It's going to be a total mess. So get yourself prepared. Make sure you have batteries. Make sure you have candles. Make sure you have water. Or get a life straw where you can drink water out of lakes and stuff. Get these tablets that can go in that will make your water clean and clear to drink. There are plenty of things out there you can get, and I would start getting it right now. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.